folks, so today I thought we'd have a look at climate change. So if you put that as your kind of overall heading. Now there's lots of elements to climate change, but today I figured we'd have a look at just the causes. Okay, so we're going to break those into two categories. So you can draw like a kind of wavy line if you're doing this in your book or on your sheet of paper. And on this side, so over here, we're going to have our, I'm going to draw a stick man or stick woman, our human causes. Okay, so these are basically things that human beings have done to accelerate the greenhouse effect, or what we call the enhanced greenhouse effect. And then over on this side, we are going to have our more natural causes, because the greenhouse effect has been in effect, I guess, for a long, long time. It's what's created life on Earth as we know it. For this, I'm just going to kind of draw a volcano of sorts, if that looks like it. There we go. And we're going to go through some of the natural causes on this side. So if we start with the human causes, so human beings have obviously been around for quite a long time, but it's only actually in recent history that we've been having a bit more of an impact on the planet where we live. And that's through lots and lots of different ways. So the first way, which you'll perhaps kind of be familiar with, perhaps not, are through power stations. Now, almost everything we do nowadays is using power, like most things. Even, you know, the smallest kind of items that you might buy in the shops have been created using electricity or use electricity. And historically, power stations basically have run using three types of fuel, whether that's oil that's being burnt, or coal, or gas. And all of those are fossil fuels. So if you just want to write oil, coal, and gas. Now these are things that have built up over millennia in the ground. So black kind of oil, try and make that a bit more of a teardrop actually, there we go, shape, which obviously we use for transportation as well. And then we've got coal, which is kind of rough pieces. Just going to colour those in a little bit so you can still see the shape. And then, you know, gas is invisible, isn't it? But, you know, kind of particles of gas, which more recently they're finding under the ground in rock. You know, they can actually get it out. It's called fracking, and it's shale gas that they're getting hold of. So this way of kind of producing power or electricity, okay, we've got a lightning bolt there to show electricity, it's quite old-fashioned, it's really damaging for the planet, and it emits carbon dioxide. So this sort of smoke that's coming out there is mainly carbon dioxide, but there's also other chemicals and nasty gases like nitrous oxides and things in there as well. So that's kind of the main one. There are others though as well. So we mentioned briefly, didn't we, with oil, that oil can also, so let's bring that over here, be turned into petrol or diesel. Now, both of these things are used for transportation. Now, transportation is more than just transporting you, your family and your friends, you know, maybe by road, you know, or not in a car. There's a lot of roads and there are a lot of cars now. So we've got our, I'm actually terrible at drawing cars, I'm just going to write the word cars today. We've got our cars, but also something we don't often think about is our boats and our planes as well that are using oil as well. So we've got petrol and diesel cars going on. We have got, let's have a go, let's draw a boat. God, I should be better at this. And these boats, you know, that can carry shipping containers and things across, you know, big, big oceans, they use enormous amounts, absolutely enormous amounts of fuel. So these boats, yeah, they're very, very kind of polluting, I guess. And they, you know, sometimes you can even see the clouds of steam, that are being sent off by these boats. Not just steam, sorry, gases and things. And some of these boats can be, I think the longest ones are nearly a mile long. So, we're talking proper, huge, heavy boats that are just traveling around the planet every day of the week, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all the time, transporting goods. And then there's one more, and I'm really bad at drawing these, but anyway, let's have a go. Really bad. Anyway, there we go. It's sort of supposed to be a plane. It's not a very good one. Anyway, there we go. So we've got our plane windows going in, cockpit. There we go. Now you can't see it, but where the turbines are, where the jet engines are huge amounts of gases. They are incredibly polluting. And they aren't just carrying people who are off on holiday or working, in jobs abroad. They're also carrying a huge amount of cargo. Most of our fresh fruit and vegetables are taken by plane from other countries to us. So, yeah, huge amounts going on there. Oil, you can see, is a really big issue. Coal, very much so up until recently, and gas is still hugely used. So lots of things that humans are doing there with transport and electricity generation. Now, there are a few more though, because a lot of you will stop at that, and obviously if you get a 6 marker or a 9 marker potentially, you're going to need a little bit more. Now, one lots of people should know about is happening a lot in Malaysia and the Amazon. And that is, of course, deforestation. So to draw that, I think what we'll do is we'll have a tree on its side. And we'll write deforestation. Now, this is a hugely big problem because trees are what we call carbon sinks or carbon stores. And when they are cut down, they release carbon into the atmosphere when they're burnt. If they're burnt and cut down, they are also amazing because they take in CO2 and they let out oxygen, O2. And so in there is our carbon sink or carbon store, whichever you prefer to put. So it's like a double whammy. We are affecting the climate doubly by losing our forests. And I say our forests, I talk about, globally, our forests. So deforestation. Now this is often, big plus sign, this is often linked to something else that happens, which involves deforestation, which is cattle farming. Now, really bad at drawing cattle. I've said is I'm really bad at this. I'm terrible. I just don't know really how to draw a cow, but there we go. Let's give it some ears and a little nose. Anyway, there's a cow. There we go, and it's got a couple of legs there and a little tail. Right, if I make it like a dairy cow that we're used to here in the UK, hopefully it will look a bit more like a cow. Right, so cattle farming. Now, essentially what's happening around the world, mainly in our newly emerging economies, places like Malaysia, places like the Amazon, is they're cutting down the trees to make space for grazing land, for very basic, really, grasses, so they can have really, really loads and loads of cattle. So they can sell the beef basically for money. Now, this beef production is, our fast food chains like McDonald's and that are absolutely, buying it up. But also on a smaller scale with local farmers selling to local restaurants, it's just far more profitable than having a forest there with a wonderful biodiversity. So unfortunately, cattle farming is a really big one. The other thing to mention here, while we're looking at kind of climate change and gases, is out of their rear end comes methane. Okay, methane is obviously cows burp and they fart, and methane is 25 times stronger than CO2. And that's really important because farming is, I think it's worth, I mean, it might have changed, but it's about 20% of the enhanced greenhouse effect, which means it's 20% of our emissions are from cattle farming. Now these cattle would not exist if we weren't breeding them and we weren't farming for them. So it's definitely one that needs introducing. And then, then we've got our final one, which is kind of, won't be a surprise to anyone, but it's still something that we need to be aware of. And that is, I'm just going to put it in nice big words, is the manufacturing industry. Now, anything that is not natural, anything at all, a chair, a table, a pencil, a pen, any single thing that is not made of natural materials has a carbon footprint, and that even comes down to things like our clothes. So if you think about buying a t-shirt, okay, or I don't know, pair of shorts, all of these things use energy and have a carbon footprint. And actually the clothes and the kind of clothing industry is a huge one. It has, just if you think about the volume of clothes that are being used worldwide, it is massive. But anything else, any kind of goods, any kind of plastic items, don't get confused with plastic and climate change. It's just that plastic uses oil in its production, and through that factory process. So, it's anything from toys, plastic items, clothes, tech is another one, technology. So we have to be kind of really careful. I do another video on this on how we can manage climate change and mitigate for it. But if we think about how we travel, where we're getting our electricity from, because there are green providers these days, how often we're traveling, whether or not we have any direct links to deforestation. Are we buying timber, for example, from sustainable forests? What's our meat production and meat consumption like? How many people are vegetarian? How many are eating a lot of meat? And then what are we doing as consumers? How much are we buying that maybe we are buying slightly unnecessarily? Okay, I should just mention this point. This video has come about because it was a request from one of my subscribers. So do give me a shout if there's ever anything you want to get some information on. So we've done human causes. Let's do natural now. Now I'm going to keep this to fewer. There are quite a few, you believe. I mean, many of you would just think volcanoes, but there are a few more. But we're going to keep this fairly chilled on this side. So the first one, you probably already guessed, is a volcano. Okay. So I'm just going to draw one of those, an erupting volcano with some volcanic bombs. Okay, and we're going to write next to it volcanic eruptions. Now, you might think that because they are spewing out CO2, that they are actually causing climate change to be worse and for the planet to heat up through the enhanced greenhouse effect. But in actual fact, strangely, volcanic eruptions do a number of different things. Number one, firstly, ash that's thrown out from the volcano actually blocks the sun. Okay, so the sun's ultraviolet radiation that's trying to come in to warm up the planet is actually blocked just by the sheer amount of ash that's in the sky. If you have a supervolcano erupt, a huge amounts of ash, it can cause a volcanic winter. So let's put that in brackets, volcanic winter. And essentially what that means is you have a winter for maybe a year. I think the last one was in about 1816 when Mount Tamboa erupted. And yeah, there was just really no sunlight for about a year. It caused a lot of deaths. It was a really big problem. But it actually cooled the planet, okay, by quite a lot. I think it was about 1 degree or 2 degrees. So we'll say up to 2 degrees Celsius. Okay, so yeah, it will cool down the planet, which is odd. But remember, we're talking about climate change. We're not just talking about global warming. So this is things that affect our climate. So we've got our human causes and we're doing our natural ones at the moment. So yeah, so the ash blocks the sun. The other thing it does is it causes tiny amounts of sulfur dioxide, which kind of comes out of the volcano. And those tiny particles act like little mirrors and they reflect sunlight as well. So what sunlight does come in very often gets reflected back out. So it's sort of a double whammy. So again, cooling the planet. So one could think, oh, well, we just need a big volcanic eruption and then we'll be all right. But unfortunately, it will be a temporary solution. It won't last long. And in the time that we're having that volcanic winter, we will have some very big problems with crop yields and food production and so on. So yeah, it's not really ideal. Right, the next one, I'm going to draw a big sun for this one, is something called solar activity or the sunspot theory. So let's put in here sunspot cycle. Now, the sun is very big and very, very hot. And sometimes when you're looking at the sun, you can see these kind of black spots on it. I'm just going to put an arrow to that one there. So a black spot on the sun, you might think that's a cold spot on the sun. It's actually, not cold, but cooler. However, it's not. It means it's hotter. And these really, really dark areas are super, super hot. And then what we get from them are solar flares, which are where the heat is actually escaping from the sun, and kind of increased solar activity. Now, the sun is fairly predictable in this sense, because what happens is it sort of has a cycle. So I think it's every sort of I want to say 26,000 years, I believe it is. You get these big solar flares, and then other times there'll be less, and then it will be more and more of a cooling mode. But it's still interesting that when you see these black spots, and we can spot them, then we know that we're going to get more ultraviolet radiation coming towards planet Earth, and we need to be prepared for that. It's going to cause additional warming. So the sun has quite a big impact. Now the other thing, let's think about, we've got lots about the sun today. Let's draw 2 suns there. Now, the Earth is very small compared to the sun. Right, if you're not sure, that's the Earth. Okay, and this Earth moves in a mostly circular orbit. Okay, not perfectly circular, but mostly circular orbit for a lot. Oh, let's go to that. Circular orbit for most of the time. Then, every 100,000 years, which, let's face it, isn't very long in the Earth's history, it changes to mildly elliptical. So again, if you imagine that again is the Earth, okay, instead of being in that sort of circle, it does kind of a bit more like that. Okay, that's not obviously this is A, not to scale, and B, not a perfect drawing, but you can see how that's more elliptical than that circle, which means the distance between the sun and the Earth at times becomes smaller, and that can cause increased heating. And then at other times the distance is longer, and that's when we get what we call an ice age. Okay, and then when it's smaller, as I said, it's warmer. Okay, so that's about every 100,000 years. Obviously that that process will have a huge impact on Earth's climate. But the climate change that we're seeing evidence of at the moment, that's happening much quicker than this. Okay, so we're pretty sure it's more, well, we're certain it's more about human beings and what we're doing. And then there's just one kind of final one. So if we imagine we're drawing, there we go. That's supposed to be like a lake. Okay, obviously it's not the clearest lake, but there we go. Let's write Arctic. Let me just move my sheet so you can see. We go Arctic lake. Now, what some scientists have been doing is they've been smashing holes in these frozen lakes up in the Arctic, and where they're cracking, there have been like releasing gases, lots and lots and lots of methane. And it's coming from under the ground, and it's coming from inside these frozen lakes where there is basically really old creatures, even things like woolly mammoths that have died and have decomposed, or sort of decomposed, but been frozen in ice. And now, as that ice is melting due to a warming climate, those corpses, those bodies of those creatures are starting to now decompose and create that methane. And this is, remember, it's 25 times stronger than CO2. So that's what could cause something called a tipping point. And a tipping point, there's a number of different ones, but a tipping point is something in the Earth's climate that once it happens, it can't be undone. It's a bit like Greenland melting. So once these all start escaping, it could really send us into a greater warming cycle. So there you have it, as requested. Human causes, natural causes. There are others within the Milankovitch theory, which is to do with orbital changes. There are a couple of others that you can look at, but I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible for you guys. I will do another video for you on the effects of climate change, which I can't believe I haven't done actually, so I will do that one for you very soon, again as requested. There you go. I hope that's helpful.